And I also teach in a College of Business and have always taught in the colleges of business and management schools, but I teach in a College of Business that actually has social justice in its mission statement, so I think that makes it somewhat unusual. I also wanted to mention, you think this is not relevant, but I was born in Ireland, grew up in the UK, and I only mention this partly because I like the 6.9% chant, but we don't do chants, the culture way. It's just one of these things. The other thing is we're not very good at inspiring stories either, so I apologize in advance for the downbeat nature of the presentation. But so the two things I really wanted to talk about very quickly are union structure, and finding new structures are relevant to the new economy, and then the broader question about how to redefine the debate on labour rights. Now, of course, in the first point, first very obvious thing is that the labour movement has not always looked like the way that it does at the moment. I mean, sometimes we assume that unions have always been the way that they currently are, with the emphasis on job security and on work rules and on seniority, etc. But of course, that's not always the case, and there's plenty of examples from the historical literature that present alternative models, and if you read things like Sue Cobble's wonderful book on waitresses unions and so forth, it presents much interesting alternative models, maybe not unlike the freelancer case. The current labour movement and the law is very much a product of a different era, the era where people worked in large workplaces for extended periods of time, and employers had very well developed internal labour markets and so forth. We do have a few examples, some of which have been mentioned, about how the existing labour movement can relate to the new economy or to this new emerging workforce. People are probably familiar with examples about the car wash workers in LA who've affiliated with the steel workers and who recently signed their first collective bargaining agreements, or as Jay mentioned, about the domestic workers and the struggle for domestic workers' Bill of Rights, both in California, in New York, and internationally at the ILO and so forth, and cases of taxi drivers, of port truckers and so forth. And these are wonderful stories, and they will, in many cases transform the lives, hopefully, of the workers involved. But unfortunately, they're very much around the periphery. And this is not in any way to dismiss their significance, but to take the example of car wash workers, well, no one outside of LA understands the importance of that, because nowhere else other than Southern California are car wash workers, of any importance whatsoever. So, it needs to go beyond that, and certainly, unions can provide services and job training and educational qualifications and all the rest of it, and this, again, is to be encouraged, and it's something that I think is very good development. But, unions aren't MBA programs. I mean, I teach on MBA programs. I kind of understand that, so it has to be some sort of collective impulse that's at the center of what we do. And I really don't think that it's possible to reverse the 6.9% private sector density unless there's some way we can redefine the debate in this country over labour rights. Jay cited, when he was corresponding with us, the example of the Berkeley Bowl, and the very fact that you can have an employer like the Berkeley Bowl in a place like Berkeley engage in the most vicious anti-union practices that really make it indistinguishable from Walmart, and there's almost no story there. Tells us a great deal about the very, very sorry state about the debate of labour rights in the United States. And so how are we going to redefine that debate? Well, I mean, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen through the AFL-CIO or through the existing unions. I mean, we have 1 minute. There are many wonderful people in these organizations, and this is not, many of them close friends, but they're too concerned with process, they're too concerned with the internal politics of the organizations, and they've been too successfully demonized by the anti-union right and by the conservatives in this country. So it's unlikely also to come through, the George Millers or Sherrod Browns of this world. I mean, even though they've done many wonderful things, it can't be an inside the belt way. initiative, it has to come from some organization, maybe at the local level, at the state level, that's not beholden to the existing labour movement, to any particular union, that's not sort of tarnished in the same way that they are. I don't know if it's like Human Rights Watch, if it's some kind of local organisation that just takes it on as their cause, saying, we believe in labour rights, we believe in this cause, and this is something that we're going to make our issue in a very prominent way. And if you look at what's happening over the story about Apple at the moment, I think it's sort of quite instructive in some ways. I mean, who knows? This might all be some sort of just short-term media interest, but hopefully not. I mean, hopefully that we can expand this into some sort of broader debate about the state of labour rights, not just internationally, not just about US companies who are exploiting weak regulation and low-cost labour in other countries, but also extend it to a debate over the state of labour rights in this country. And one final thought. Unfortunately, though, I think the reality is that in the very short term, what we face is not the inspiring stories, not about how to redefine the debate, but more existential threats. And I really think this is, I mean, the Maldives, analogy. Even in California, we have a ballot initiative in November, this sort of completely fraudulent thing about sort of stop special interest money in politics. I noticed there's another panel on campaign finance reform, which is really about preventing unions from engaging in the political process. So it's not just in Wisconsin. If someone disagrees with me, I'll be happy to debate it with you. It's not just Ohio, it's not just Indiana. I mean, these are really very, very serious threats that we're sort of facing throughout the country.
Thank you, John. Next is Carrie Ann Steele. I apologize, I have a bad cold and I kind of blanked out. But Carrie Ann Steele.
All right, well, I know who I am, so I'm not concerned. Okay. Carrie Ann Steele, labor lawyer, and while this is I'm 32 years old, and people in my age bracket are considered to be members of either Generation X or Generation Y. It depends on what definition is being applied. And we're also regarded as the lost generation. The lost generation is 20-something, 30-something-year-old people. And what does it mean to be a member of the lost generation? I'm going to talk about that. College are facing enormous school debt, and it's something they carry around with them for years thereafter. We also are facing high unemployment. In the age bracket of 18 to 24-year-olds, the current unemployment rate is 16.3%. If you break it out by demographic within that age group, it could be even strikingly higher in some other groups. We're delaying some major life choices because we feel financial insecurity. Major life choices such as perhaps marriage or buying a home or having children. And we also are putting off starting a quote-unquote career. Many people are dabbling a little bit here, a little bit there to make ends meet financially, but aren't really on any sort of track. And a lot of us are moving back in with our parents, or maybe we're never leaving our parents' homes. Is this familiar to anyone in the room? You got a 20-something or 30-something-year-old relative who's lived with you either currently or at some point. This is very, very common. And we're going to have many different jobs in our lifetimes. We're going to have many different careers. So there's not the same one track throughout our lives as there might have been in the past. And increasingly, we work as independent contractors. This is because of the external economic situation, but sometimes we prefer that. We say we like the flexibility of that. So what does that mean for organized labor? Well, in January, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released a stat that between 2010 and 2011, there are 15,000 new union members between the ages of 16 to 24. Is that enough? Is that an impressive statistic? I don't think so, personally. So how do we inform young people that unions exist? How do we inform them that unions are not a relic of the old economy? And how do we convey the message, and this is a message I believe in very strongly, that unions are the most effective vehicle for countering or challenging corporate greed? And how do we involve young people in the labor movement? So I'm going to humbly suggest 4 different avenues. These are short-term goals, and if anyone else has other suggestions, that are in addition or different, please do shout them out later in our session. But first, I think that unions need to continue to be, and perhaps be more so than they are currently, very visible in their support of legislation that is in the interest of young people. Legislation geared at job creation, funding for vocational training, perhaps school loan forgiveness. And just a side note before I move on to the second suggestion, there have been times recently, very recently, where organized labor and young people's groups have come head to head on legislation. For example, the alphabet soup of anti-piracy legislation that's been initiated. SOPA, PIPA, ACTA, do any of these sound familiar? So the AFL-CIO and some of its affiliates have supported that legislation because they represent a lot of people who are subject to threat if copyright and trademarks are infringed upon. And then young people's groups have said, wait a second, we operate in a culture where we share a lot of information. It's called found or borrowed information. We share this electronically. You're infringing upon our right of speech. And so some of you may have seen the blackouts of January 18th, 2012. Google blacked out its name all day. Wikipedia blacked out all its content all day. And a lot of young people were supportive of that. So that's just one example of how there may be a conflict. But the takeaway is that I think that labor really needs to be out there and out front in legislative efforts that support young people. Second, the AFL-CIO has initiated a campaign called Next Up. Next Up meaning young people, the next generation of leaders. And this is really to the credit of Secretary Treasurer Liz Schuler. She's 41 years old. She is the AFL-CIO's youngest person ever to hold the second highest position in that organization. And so they have initiated a Young Workers Summit. It's an annual conference where they pull together young union member leaders and ask them to serve as delegates and speak on behalf of their age group. And out of that has developed the Young Worker Advisory Council, and that's supposed to be an ongoing, year-long, multi-year-long effort to try to address issues of young people. And I think that those efforts should be fairly successful because I think for the most part, people of our generation believe that they're entitled to have a seat at the table with management and have a voice in government. So I think that there should be some very qualified and eager young leaders among our group. Next, unions need to continue to, and perhaps use more, social media. Social media, Facebook, it just announced it hit 845 million users. If it were a country, it would be the third most populated in the entire world. We need to use Twitter. We need to use YouTube. For example, we need to convey to young people that our movement is fun and interesting. I can think of one YouTube posting that has stuck in my mind, which was the flash mob of the Westin in San Francisco, where everyone was dancing and there was a band playing to a Lady Gaga remake. And it was talking about how the hotel was a bad employer. And that went viral. That's a term which means it goes throughout the internet. It was very popular. It got a lot of hits. These are things we need to do to invite people into our movement and make it seem fun. How many of you were involved in the, say, November 2nd day of general strike or day of action? Okay. It had a festive feel until the sun went down. It had a festive feel, right? That's the feeling we want to convey about the labor movement. It's fun. It's something you want to be a part of. And last, I think that we need to continue to engage in progressive efforts to challenge economic inequality. So continue to engage in efforts like the Occupy movement. We may have some different ideas regarding strategy, but this may be the first time that we are able to show young people in that movement that we care about more than just self-preservation. And it may be the first time that young people in that movement get to ever have any firsthand contact with unions and union members. So those are just my 4 humble suggestions. And
Thank you. So now we can have, I think we have a brother and a sister from the ILWU who want to say a few words to us. And to everybody, presenters and people here, I apologize for the lack of time to take on these different issues. We're going to hear a few words here. If we have we might be able to talk just a wee bit more, but then we're going to have to leave because the occupation. Feel free to do so.
consists of separating the recyclable material,
como es plástico, aluminio, cartón y papel,
the plastic, aluminum, paper, and cardboard.
y estoy el día de hoy aquí para compartir un poco con ustedes acerca de lo que es mi trabajo.
Yeah, I'm here today just to share a little bit about what my work entails to you guys.
En algunas ocasiones llega material un poco peligroso porque trabajamos también con asbesto, jeringas y tóxicos, con químicos.
So she's saying like sometimes the work is very dangerous because sometimes you're handling asbestos, you're handling chemicals, you're handling syringes that come into the recycling. You know, like have to take care when you're doing that.
Como comunidad creo que es bueno que estén conscientes de lo que es el trabajo porque alguna vez solamente nos concretamos en pagar el bill y sacar lo que es común llamarle basura.
As a community, it's good for people to know what the work actually entails because it's really easy for us to just pay the bill, put the garbage out, and forget about it, and forget that there's people who have to handle it.
Pero la verdad es que no sabemos realmente cuál es qué fin tiene la basura que dejamos, que usamos.
And many times we don't know what the actual end of the trash we throw out actually is.
Estoy muy contenta de trabajar para esta compañía y de que se preocupe por el bien del planeta y el reciclar. No me avergüenzo de trabajar para esta compañía haciendo lo que hago, pero la verdad que sí me gustaría que tomaran un poquito más de conciencia de la compañía para la que trabajo y que pensara como seres humanos que somos y que pensara un poquito más en sus trabajadores. Muchas gracias por su tiempo, que tengan un buen día.
And I'm not ashamed of the work that I do. I actually like the work that I do, but I would like to make sure that the company also have the consciousness that we are human beings and we do need to have respect and a livable way so we can take care of our families. Thank you very much.
Ships it out to the Altamont landfill. And the clerical workers have been working on an expired contract for over 2 years. The landfill has been on an expired contract for over a year. The recycle workers are on an expired contract for over 6 months now. And so we know in 2007, Waste Management locked out the workers, the Teamsters, and put the machinists and the ILW out on the street also. And we just think it's very important that when we look at, when we talk about sustainability, we look at what really the companies that come in and do the work in our community. We talk about local jobs. Let's talk about employers being responsible to the local community. And this is really critical. We know there are a lot of good employers, and a bunch of them are in the recycling industry. And a lot of local employers that are in the recycling industry, and we need to hold those that come from outside of our community accountable to the same kind of standards that we want for all of us. Thank you.
Well, so unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I want to thank everybody, but I want to make 2 points. One is, I think what the brother just last said is a very, very important thing. The sustainability movement talks a lot about transparency, about understanding systemic risk, about understanding where different things come from, the problems, environmentally. And I think one of the ways that the union movement can hook up with the popular kind of zeitgeist is to talk about that type of thing, because we have a story to tell about that. And the second is that for all the problems that unions have, and we got a ton, there is no alternative at this point to workers coming together. And the only way that working people have ever had power is in unity. The form I became the president of the East Bay Express, but I'm also a union lawyer, and I've been a union organizer. My first organizing job was in 1968, when I was arrested in southern Louisiana with myself, who was working for the Amalgamated Wheat Cutters at the time, a guy from SDS, and a Christian brother, and we were trying to organize sugarcane workers there. Fortunately, the charges were thrown out, but And now I still represent some unions, although I do much more writing and working with the newspaper. And we've got an exciting newspaper now in terms of the things that we're doing. So we have the descriptions of most of our presenters are in your program, so I'm not going to say much more, except two of them are not. One, Andreas Kluver is with us. I'm very excited. He's the Secretary Treasurer of Alameda County Building Trades. Andreas worked as the AFL-CIO rep in Southern Africa for a number of years, helping to organize textile, garment, metal, and security workers. He's worked as a compliance officer enforcing prevailing wage issues, worked for a community nonprofit, City of Oakland, and he has a master's from Cal here as well. That is the form that unions have been historically organized into over the last at least 90 or 100 years. Are they still the forms for today? Certainly the AFL-CIO has tried a number of approaches, associate membership, this type of thing. And we have workers in categories that aren't able to get union rights, like the court workers at the Port of Oakland, who are considered to be independent contractors, and they come together as an antitrust right. Or domestic workers. There was a meeting in Sacramento recently to try to get more rights for domestic workers. And we have a number of these things too. And then we're going to close our program with just a little bit. We've got some brothers and sisters here who are involved in the struggle, and they're going to talk to us a little bit here at the end. And you really shouldn't have a discussion period where you talk about workers' issues without having some of that being as well. But they'll probably be at the end. So if y'all want to have a seat right now, it might be good. So I think we'll start with Carl. You want me up over here? That'd be good.
If you can be there, but won't use the microphone. Whatever you put up.
This would be good, because I just thought driving over here, I'd come up with a new chant, or try out, see what you think. We are the 6.9%. What do you think? Got a nice ring to it. 6.9% being the private sector union percentage of the workforce. It's a little bit lower than it used to be. At one point, I think it was more like 35%. And I think the soft coal industry is well over 50%. Public sector is still pretty high. But I think it's fair to say that in some industries, mine included, publications, communications, we've been rubbed out, except for a few islands, which I compared to the Maldives. I was also trying to figure out, what do you call somebody from the Maldives? Maldivian? Or, I just don't know. I'd like to be educated. Does somebody know? Maybe what is it? Maldivian? Sounds like some kind of a gluten allergy thing. If you follow what's going on in the Maldives, they're threatened by rising tides and rising ocean levels and global warming. It's pretty much going to cover over the Maldives. And the former president or prime minister or somebody of the Maldives, to dramatize this issue, held a cabinet meeting in scuba gear underwater. And as a result of that, the military in the Maldives bumped him off and sort of staged what the guy considers a coup. I think they have a different way of phrasing it. I think that's a good metaphor for the predicament we're in. We, in the labor movement, cling very tightly to the islands we have left, and we fight for that and proud of it. Try to do the best we can to save the islands that are left. But if we don't respond to the global problem that's overwhelming us, as captured by that statistic, we're done. And organized labor, in my view, is the only remaining legitimate force for working class advancement in this country. It's not the Democratic Party or MoveOn.org or any other organization that really represents working class interests with the kind of power that the labor movement can muster at its best. So, how to do that? I think it requires the unions to stop, or let's not just speak for myself, not the other unions here. They have their own, I know they have their own ideas about everything. In our case, we have kind of tried to set aside the finger pointing and the whining and start looking at ourselves. I'm a fan of a lot of rock and roll bands, including a band called Tool. They have this, I think these are all adults here, I can use a bit of language. There's a song that basically talks about a kid who accuses the mayor in the band, the singer, of selling out, and the singer in the song basically says, you know, before you point your finger at me, point your finger at yourself, and just stick your fucking finger up your ass. And I always kind of, you know, I have to remember that, you know, who am I accusing of here of doing what to me, and what does that get me? So we have sort of analyzed our internal structures and tried to figure out why is it so difficult to organize workers in our industry. There's certainly a lot of them who need organizing. One answer is that it's very difficult to get into a union. It's really hard. If you go to a union's website, I want to join that union. I dare you to do this. Just pick any union. Can you go to their website and send them some money or something and join? Mostly not. We couldn't do that in the Guild until last year. We started a new unit, which is the main point I wanted to make here in my 5 minutes. By the way, somebody give me the hook.
Yeah.
Give me a minute warning, okay?
You got 2.5 minutes.
2.5 minutes left, where we can go into great detail in 2.5 minutes. We started a freelance unit. You can go online, and if nothing else, hopefully you'll remember this URL or just Google it. I think it comes up on Google as they've schemed against us. It's called guildfreelancers.org. Guild Freelancers being the shorthand name for the freelance unit of the Pacific Media Workers Guild. I'm the executive officer of the Pacific Media Workers Guild. The freelance unit is the only freelance organization, freelance union, workers union, sponsored by a guild local in the country. We've been trying to get others started around the country with no luck so far. You can go online to that website and join right now. If you're a journalist, a writer, a poet, an artist, a photographer, somebody that does website development that presents information, fact-based, we're mostly fact-based journalism kind of thing, but we're not against poets and some of our, creative people, fiction writers and so forth. That's not our main thing, but we don't hold anything against anybody by way of craft division. If you want to join, you can join. Just click, there's PayPal. It's very easy. It's $12 a month is the dues. You get discounted dental and vision plans, and you get a press pass. Cat Anderson in the front has one. It's kind of cool. It's got a bunch of colors. It looks kind of official. Some bullshit on the back that the police can't read quickly, but it looks official, so they let you go on through. It's kind of useful. I'm not sure it's worth $12 a month, to tell you the truth, but it's worth something. I think the one point I make in my allotted time is that unions have to re-examine their structures and make it easier for people to join. Because if we do not, if we only focus on the island sinking, flooding, the old line holdout entities that are still union, we're screwed. Because that ain't where the action is. We have to do a good job for those units, and we have to represent them well, but we also have to somehow reconnect with the broader public. If I had 2.5 minutes, beyond the 2.5, but now I've probably 30 seconds left, I start talking about the occupation movement and how we need to reconnect with our history. I'm reading a book called The History of the American Working Class, which covers the period from just before the First World War up until Roosevelt. And there's some very interesting insights there about the great compromises made by the AFL and Sam Gompers, and how the mine workers and the radical elements were defeated. And I think that basically the message there, is that the American labor movement needs to reconnect with its militant past and somehow figure out a better way to connect to the unorganized. Now, one last point, I get 15 seconds, I'm done. The new economy, the people who are progressive-minded, the owners, need a union as much as anybody else. And I honor the ILWU brothers here and sisters, or is everybody brothers and sisters? We represent the staff at the ILWU, and we're proud of that role. The Guild represents a lot of union staff. We represent the staff of AFSCME 3299 and the staff of the California Labor Federation. Even the unions need unions. Thanks very much. 5 minutes, right? Was that 5 or 8?
Just perfect.
Was that 5 or 8?
You were just fine.
If I was only 5, I get 3 more.
Okay. Can everybody hear me through this mic here?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, name's Andreas Kluver, Secretary Treasurer, Alameda County Building Trades Council. And just to kind of piggyback on, but I think that, ironically, I think representing the building trades, I think after Carl's comments in terms of where he mentioned an island, I think we're probably the union sector that is probably most conservative, most accused of probably being on an island, because we've changed very little, I think, the last 50 years. And I think we've changed very little for one reason, that we've been very, very successful. And I think, in a way, victims of our success in terms of, I think we've got the members that we represent, I think, in terms of for non-professional or blue collars, traditional trades, I think we get some of the highest salaries, some of the best benefits packages, some real impacts on the workforce. I think we've been very successful in that. Where we have not been successful and where we've lost a lot is obviously in terms of the market share we represent, and certain sectors within our industry that we've given up completely, for example, residential. And we really have struggled with how do we get back and how do we grow again. I think we really need to put some real thinking into that. Having said that, though, I think we've done a very good job of representing the non-represented in the construction industry. I think through a lot of our political influence in terms of OSHA laws and wage and hour and so forth, I think we've been able to really improve working conditions for non-represented workers. The building trades, I think, are very unique. We're very different from a lot of the other, in terms of an organizing model, a lot of the other industry sectors. We have, through the NLRA, we've got top-down organizing. We're allowed to do what's called pre-hire agreements, ADEF agreements, so we can go directly to the employer and organize that employer before anybody steps foot. And so I think it really changes, it makes us very different in terms of how we look at organizing. It really gives us some other tools we have in place. And one of those tools we've had is it's kind of like a marketing strategy in terms of where we've actually managed through, I think, very sophisticated apprenticeship programs, labor management apprenticeship programs. We have been able, in many parts of the country, to really control the training. And that control of the training has really led us to have the best qualified workers, which then we can market to the employers and say, hey, yeah, we're going to cost you a lot more, but your productivity is going to increase, and and also to the client that contractor is building for in terms of guaranteeing quality work. So, with that, also I think we've been very successful, and again, focused probably on the Bay Area in doing the politics we need to do. We're very, very involved in politics and making sure that we've got folks on local and state elected positions, people that understand our issues and are friendly to our issues, and if they don't understand them, we work very hard to get them out. So I think that that's a bit of our model. Again, I think that one of the big challenges has been how do we go out and regain what we've lost? How do we go out and organize in certain demographic and populations that are taking more and more of the work? A lot of undocumented workers, a lot of Latino workers, predominantly where the industry is going. I think that our models are starting to fall short on that. With regards to the new economy, though, however, I think that's been another trait of the trades is basically we have seen very little of new economy. I mean, I think that one of the advantages we've had, and that's managed to sustain us, is they quite haven't figured out yet how to offshore us. They will, eventually. They're going to ship in the building ready-made and just put it in place. But so far, I think we've been pretty lucky in terms of still controlling the work and keeping the work local. There have been a lot of challenges, a lot of prefab issues I think we've got to deal with. We've got to internationalize a little more and have stronger partnerships. in terms of where a lot of the prefab is going on, but I think on the whole, that's been stable. In terms of the green economy, we play along with green economy because that's the buzzword now, and that's where the funding is. But in terms of green construction and regular construction, it's the same damn thing. It's exactly the same thing. Our folks have been trading in, quote, green construction for years. New technology is continuously being introduced into the workplace, and our apprenticeship programs are fully adapting to that, and our contractors are able to compete and bid on that. So, the challenges of new economy is looking at an attempt to kind of to devalue the work and put in lower prevailing wage rates than union rates for a lot of the photovoltaic installation, for example. But that's a challenge I think we can meet. I think what we've realized, though, is that in terms of economic, we're extremely vulnerable to the business cycle. Our folks are the first ones laid off and the last ones rehire when it comes to the economic down cycles. And this current recession has hit us extremely hard. We got looking at 30 to 40% of the membership unemployed. So we're extremely vulnerable to that. Yet, we are pretty resilient. We kind of made it through okay without losing too many people. So, I think that issue is one we have to grapple with in terms of the cycle. I think in terms of our strategies looking forward, in terms of what are we going to do to really continue to make ourselves relevant and to expand our base. And I think one of those, and I think that's really been happening the last 15 years, and I'm really proud to say in Alameda County we're kind of the leaders of that, if not in California, in the country, is in terms of taking a step back, looking at our membership and saying, wait a minute, this membership really does not reflect the communities that we're working in. And that's having a real negative impact on how we're perceived, and not just from an equity perspective, but also from a marketing perspective, our ability to get work and partner with public agencies to say, hey, we want you to build a union, but they come back and say, but your union members don't come from our communities, and we got to scratch our heads and say, yeah, that's actually true. So how are we going to do to change that? And I got 1 minute to wrap up. And I think that we've been very, very aggressive. And I think there's been a real change in the last 15 years in the way our unions think in terms of exclusion and inclusion. They've opened, I think, a lot more diversity to folks of color, women, in terms of trying to get them into the apprenticeship programs. We do a lot of project labor agreements in this county, both private and public. All of those project labor agreements have strong local hire language. We put a lot of effort into that. So I think that is really an area I think that we've done well in. The area we have not done well in, I think, is really come in with new strategies to really organize membership. I think the whole issue brought up by the brother around, what does it constitute to be a member? It's very difficult to get into the building trades. And those barriers to entry need to be addressed if we want to expand. So I think there's a lot of challenges. So I guess my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
I'll also sit here if that's okay. Just two things very quickly.